What is that, a Pez dispenser?
Yeah. You want one?
There aren't many brands of candy as iconic as Pez, the small and often delicious rectangular candy that is loaded and then popped out of a dispenser. Despite the fact that Pez seems as popular as ever, there's not a lot that is widely known about the little candy that could. So here are 10 things you didn't know about Pez.
The Pez is on Dad.
The name.
This is Pez Candy.
Pez is a name that is as iconic as it is short. There are few candies that are as easily recognized or as well known as Pez. However, very few English-speaking people actually know what the name Pez means, or rather, where it comes from. Pez was created in 1927 in Vienna, Austria, by Edward Haas III. The first Pez was only one flavor, peppermint, but it most likely wasn't the peppermint we're used to today, as it was more of a compressed peppermint sweet. What does that have to do with the name, you ask? Well, in the German language, the word for peppermint is Pfefferminz, abbreviated as Pez.
I like the Austrian way better. So did I.
The name and flavor wasn't the only thing that was different about that earlier version of Pez, as they also didn't come in their now famous dispensers. Rather, early Pez was encased in small, hand-sized containers that were made of tin and were similar to modern Altoid cases.
The tinsmith forgot to give me a heart.
The first Pez dispenser.
These are us as Pez?
People of all ages are familiar with the general shape and function of Pez dispensers, even if they've never actually used one. The candy is housed in a plastic stacking mechanism that has the Pez logo on each side, and atop that is typically the head of some well-known character. These include some of the best-known fictional characters, as well as some famous people from history.
It's a John F. Kennedy Pez dispenser. Oh.
Once you tilt that head back, one delicious rectangle of flavor is dispensed. However, as we just learned, that's not how Pez was originally dispensed. Pez started in tin cases, just like Altoids, then moved to cardboard cases during World War II, when basically all metal was scarce. It wasn't until the 1950s when the first dispensers were introduced, and despite the fairly obvious name choice of dispensers, they actually weren't even referred to as Pez dispensers initially. Instead, they were referred to as regulars.
You want Pez?
No.
Pez for only smokers?
Hey, you like Pez?
Sure.
Pez is a candy that is mostly marketed to children, or the child in all of us, which is obvious based on their flavor and the characters that typically reside at the top of modern Pez dispensers. However, the original Pez dispensers were called regulars, and while the story behind that name is a mystery, their original shape and size weren't a coincidence. The original peppermint Pez was marketed as a breath mint for adults. There were also Pez drops, which were round.
Or she's selling her body for Pez.
And also supposedly an alternative for those who smoked cigarettes. Some will remember that chewing gum was similarly marketed in the United States for decades. The adult target market led to adult-oriented advertising campaigns, with pin-up girls being a part of a lot of Pez marketing. This changed during the US post-World War II era, and the target market switched to catering towards children, which made some sense considering the post-war baby boom.
Besides, he's a baby boomer. They invented drugs.
Pez didn't cross the pond until 1953.
That's American tradition right there.
When you grow up with a candy that is as omnipresent and as delicious as Pez, you can't really imagine a world in which kids grew up without this delicious candy. So it may come as a surprise that Pez only came to the United States in 1953, as it seems like something as equally brilliant and old school as Pez should have at least hit the US much earlier.
What did you put the Pez dispenser on a leg for in the first place?
Another big surprise is that Pez wasn't immediately popular in the United States. The Pez people decided that they had to diversify their offerings beyond just peppermint and began to introduce the gamut of fruit flavors that we know today. The change was exactly what the company needed, and it was only a short time after that they also replaced the heads used on their dispensers and began using different character heads, like Mickey Mouse. This helped solidify the massive change the brand went through, from one that appealed to adults and smokers to one that appealed to children and came with a dispenser as important as the candy itself.
Would you care for some Pez?
They still sell tons of Pez.
He's hooked on Pez.
There are countless examples of something that was huge with one generation having trouble staying popular with the following generations. Candy is no exception. Pez has seemingly bucked that trend thus far, which is probably due to the combination of their delicious taste and also the huge demand for new Pez dispensers. The iconic Pez dispenser is part of a huge collector market. Due to that consistent popularity, Pez is still available in 60 countries around the world, with the internet allowing people anywhere to order their favorite candy and its plastic housing.
You know, my favorite thing about the internet is that it's 100% secure.
Their popularity is massive in the United States, where there are over 3 billion Pez candies purchased each year. While that stat is often reported as 3 billion candies consumed, it's safe to say a large amount of that candy is never consumed, as it's purchased by collectors who know the main cardinal sin in the collecting world is to open any collectible. The global total is over 5 billion candies and 70 million dispensers. Either way, that's tons of candy, literally.
And you know, I shouldn't have given him Pez and said they were vitamins.
Making Pez is no joke.
Either it's all a joke or none of it is.
Despite its Austrian origins, Pez the candy is actually headquartered in the United States, in Orange, Connecticut to be precise. The actual dispensers and some of the candy are still made in Austria, as well as Slovenia and China. The president of Pez Candy is actually referred to as the President. The manufacturing process is a relatively complicated one, and each candy is subjected to over 3,000 pounds of pressure. But this is perhaps the least important part of the process. The most important part? Sugar, of course. Over 50,000 pounds of granulated sugar is delivered to the Pez factory every 4 days. That sugar is then milled to create granulated sugar, which is the most important ingredient in the candy industry. That building block is then mixed with things like corn syrup, plant-based fats, and other ingredients, depending on the type of Pez being made, and then pressed by machines that apply that 3,000 pounds to turn the candy mix into the tiny candy rectangle we all love and recognize.
Stolen Pez, anyone?
Pez Collecting Mania.
Who makes a Pez dispenser of somebody's head when they're engaged?
A big part of Pez's popularity and bottom line is the large and active collecting community that snaps up everything Pez, from the new dispensers to the original tin cases, regulars, or advertisements, both in English and its original German, especially the old-time Pez Girl pinup ads. Despite its popularity these days, the first convention for Pez collectors, known as Pez Heads, didn't happen until 1991, a full 4 decades after Pez was introduced in the United States. While that was the first, it definitely wasn't the last. Collector conventions exploded across the country in the years since, with the Pez Mania convention growing to become the largest convention of Pez heads in the world.
Well, they're hard to load.
The 29th Pez Mania was a multi-day affair in July of 2019 and was billed as having more Pez than you have ever imagined. The Pez collector community can be broken down into groups and tiers as well, with the top collectors being called Master Pez collectors. There are also Pez dealers who make their living buying and selling valuable Pez dispensers, and also Pez authors who write books specifically about the little candy that everyone loves.
Scary stuff, scary stuff, scary stuff. Ding!
Pez once had a super creepy mascot.
I don't think they make a werewolf Pez.
A recent study showed that more Americans fear clowns than climate change. Being a clown these days is definitely tough, thanks to movies like It and that growing irrational fear of adults who paint their faces in an attempt to bring joy to the world. Granted, there were all those people dressed as evil clowns appearing in cities and rural areas across the United States and Canada, whose intentions were never really discovered. So we take back everything we just said, as clowns are terrifying and clearly plotting to take over the world.
Take your pick.
Billy boy.
We bring this up since Pez used to actually have a mascot, one that they rightly abandoned back in the 1980s after about 2 decades of service. His name was Pete Pez. Pete was a clown, and he was in Pez ads everywhere around that time. One has to wonder whether or not those ads are as popular to collect as the other ads, like the Pez girls from the 1940s.
Creeped out.
Pez and Ebay.
Damn you, eBay!
One of the more popular and consistent items sold on the world's largest auction site, eBay, is, in fact, Pez. But the relationship between Pez and eBay is actually a lot deeper, and as a viral story years ago claimed, it was Pez itself that gave the founder of eBay, Pierre Omidyar, the catalyst to create a site where his fiancée, Pamela, could trade and add to her Pez collection. While this was widely reported after eBay's marketing department reported about it, there is actually zero truth to the story that Pez is partially responsible for eBay's initial success.
My life has been a lie! God is dead! The government's lame!
It was reported and supported by books like The Perfect Store and credible newspapers like the Wall Street Journal and The New Yorker that because his fiancée wanted a place to buy and trade her wares, the eBay founder created the site Auction Web, which 2 years later became eBay. However, eBay's third employee and first PR manager, Lou Song, admitted way after the fact that the entire story was made up to drum up interest in the fledgling auction site. Creation myths like this are actually super popular in the tech industry, as everyone loves the idea of a company starting in a garage, for example, which is the story behind the largest company in the world, Apple. Song summed up perfectly by stating, "No one wants to hear about a 30-year-old genius who wanted to create a perfect market."
Everybody lies on the internet.
Santa is the best-selling Pez dispenser of all time.
Ho, ho, ho.
While the news that Santa Claus is the best-selling Pez dispenser of all time might come as a surprise, it actually makes a lot of sense, as it's one of the few Pez dispensers that is released or re-released every single year. Many of the other dispenser heads come and go as marketing trends change. Meanwhile, the Santa Pez dispenser remains a very popular stocking stuffer in many countries. While Santa may be the most popular dispenser, it is by no means the most collectible, as rarity and collectability go hand in hand. One of the most expensive Pez dispensers is a 50s-era dispenser that has a transparent space gun instead of the traditional character head. That Pez dispenser sold for over $11,000, but that is by no means the holy grail of Pez dispenser collectibles or prices. That honor goes to the Mr. Potato Head Pez dispenser that was marketed as the Make a Face Mr. Potato Head and came with attachable face pieces.
What are you looking at, you hockey puck?
What makes it so valuable and rare is that it came with multiple pieces that could easily be lost. The tallest Pez dispenser is one featuring The Simpsons matriarch Marge Simpson, who is as famous for her tall hair as she is for her raspy voice. That dispenser comes in at over 5 inches tall, which is a decent amount larger than the average dispenser. While Santa has sold the most, he might not be the most popular. The debate amongst Pez heads is whether Santa or the Mickey Mouse Pez dispenser is the most popular. It seems Mickey is often caught up in Pez-related debates. The question to be answered is whether or not he was the first Pez dispenser head, or if that honor falls to cartoon legend Popeye the Sailor Man.
Yeah, I'm surprised you haven't realized this is not how a human being is supposed to look.
Treat yourself to more and tap that screen to check out one of these Rate Babbletop videos. And show us some love by hitting that subscribe button and ringing that bell to join our notification squad.